Part 49. The Emperor goes to the spring hunting with his family. In the Yin Yu Palace, Ming Ruo hurriedly walked into the dormitory and reported to concubine Luo, Shu Ruo Lan, who was sitting on the Kong bed reading a book. "Oh, have you gotten any news that the Emperor is going to take anyone with him?" Shu Ruo Lan put down the book in her hand, and the light in her eyes flashed. "Haven't heard from it yet." Ming Ruo shook her head. "But there should be a letter soon. There is still a month left before the spring hunting. And the concubines who were selected by the Emperor to accompany must also have to prepare, naturally. Mother will definitely be among them. I'm not going this time." Shu Ruo Lan picked up the book again. "Is there any news over there in the Yunhai Palace? Mother is not going?" Ming Ruo was shocked by the master's first words, and couldn't help but scream, so she was glared at by Shu Ruo Lan. Only then did she realize that she was out of shape, and hurriedly bent down and saluted. "Yes." The slave is speechless. "It's just mother, you didn't say you were going to take advantage of this opportunity. How could you not go?" "It's because I want to take advantage of this opportunity that I can't go. Otherwise, let the Emperor point the finger of suspicion at me?" Shu Ruo Lan smiled slightly, and said indifferently, "In the midst of strategizing, the decisive victory is thousands of miles away. Don't you understand this truth? As long as it is arranged, it will be the same with or without me in command. That being the case, I am happy to spend my days in the palace waiting for news." Ming Ruo blinked her eyes, didn't say anything for a long time, and finally gave a thumbs up and said, "Yes, the slave understands. Mother is really courageous." "What kind of courage is this?" Shu Ruo Lan smiled bitterly. "It's just that it's forced to this point, and I have to break the net. It's just that I'm greedy. So I naturally hope that the fish is dead, but my net is intact." "Okay. Let me ask you, is there any news from the Yunhai Palace?" "Oh, yes," the slave almost forgot. News came back from Yunhai Palace that Jing Lianghou took a few big horses and ponies back, and now His Royal Highness Crown Prince, His Second Highness and the remnants of the former dynasty have to practice horseback archery every day in addition to following concubine Wen to learn the subset of scriptures and history. Probably to prepare for the spring hunting. Concubine Wen mother didn't see the practice, so it's not sure if he will go to the spring hunting. Shu Ruo Lan's face was already bright, and she put down the book and whispered excitedly, "No need to investigate anymore, he will definitely go." "Why is mother so sure?" Ming Ruo was stunned for a moment, but heard Shu Ruo Lan laugh and said, "Do you still need to ask?" Even if he didn't want to go, since the remnants of the former dynasty were going, how could he not follow them? Why did he endure humiliation and secretly enter the palace as a concubine? Those two remnants are his life, if he lets them go to spring hunting with the Emperor and the Crown Prince alone. Can he rest assured? Mother is right. The slave was stupid and didn't even think of this. Ming Ruo's eyes also lit up, and there was an excited expression on her face. "Mother, isn't it time for us to start arranging?" Shu Ruo Lan nodded, then slowly leaned back, leaned on the soft pillow, and said lightly, "From today onwards, this palace is going to be seriously ill. And you can arrange it for the imperial physician to take medicine." Ming Ruo took a deep breath, bowed down and saluted. "Yes, the slave will arrange it." "Concubine Luo is sick? How can it be so coincidental? Didn't she like the excitement of spring hunting in the past? What happened to be sick this time, and she couldn't even go to spring hunting?" In the imperial study, Xia Linxuan listened to Xiao Beiji's report. His eyes couldn't help but squint slightly, put down the fold in his hand, picked up the teacup in front of him and took a sip lightly. While asking Xiao Beiji, concubine Luo has been sick since a month ago, and the slave has reported to the emperor, and the emperor has gone to investigate. Why have you forgotten it now? Xiao Beiji bowed down and replied respectfully, but heard Xia Linxuan say in surprise, "Is it that illness? It's been postponed and still hasn't healed? What does the hospital do to eat?" Back to the emperor, "The illness has been cured. It's just that this winter has gone to spring, and the climate is uncertain. So concubine Luo's body has been weak since she got sick. When the slave went to deliver the decree before, mother said that although the action was fine, she couldn't ride a horse. So she didn't go to spoil the emperor." "I see." Xia Linxuan slowly turned the teacup in his hand, but he didn't speak again. Xiao Beiji looked at him beside him, not knowing what he thought in his heart, because he smiled and said, "If concubine Luo knew that the emperor cared about her so much, she would be very happy." "Does the emperor want the servant to send some supplements over?" Xia Linxuan nodded and said, "You can arrange this matter." "No. You should go over in person. And you go to the pharmacy of the Internal Affairs Office to pick up a few high-grade ginsengs." "Yes." Xiao Beiji agreed, and was even more suspicious in his heart, secretly saying that since concubine Wen returned to Yunhai Palace, the emperor has never been to other places in the harem. Why is it that now that concubine Luo's illness is cured, the emperor is more concerned? Xia Linxuan seemed to see through Xiao Beiji's doubts, so he said, "I don't care about her illness, I'm afraid that she will use her illness as an excuse. And there is something to plan for a decisive victory thousands of miles away, but this cannot be guarded against. Although concubine Yan is dead, how many women in this harem are good to live with? You also have to be deaf and clear-sighted on weekdays, and the safety of Qiutai is not only in my hands, but also on the shoulders of you servants, understand?" "Yes." The servant understands. Xiao Beiji's heart froze, and he hurriedly responded, secretly saying that the emperor is to concubine Wen. How can this be infinite grace? This is simply the love of life. And I haven't been so careful with myself. Your Highness, slow down. Shanyan, slow down, beware of falling. The weather at the end of March is already very warm. The royal hunting ground on the outskirts of Beijing, the wildflowers all over the mountains are blooming colorfully, the trees in the forest are either full of flowers, or the leaves are showing new green, all of which are very spiritual and lovely, and the air is filled with a faint fragrance of flowers, fresh and pleasant." Pu Qiutai sat on horseback next to Xia Linxuan, but he didn't care about serving the Holy King, but stared at the few Dian horses that ran away in front of him, holding the reins tightly with both hands. And his palms were full of sweat. "Mother concubine, rest assured, nothing will happen." Xia Dongming laughed and shouted on the horseback. He and Zhu Shanyan, Xia Dongqing rode a short horse. But his physical strength was very good, and at this time, he spread his hooves and galloped, not losing to the horses of the guards next to him. Before the shouting fell, he suddenly saw a white rabbit popping out of the forest in front of him. Xia Dongming shouted excitedly, pulled out a feather arrow from the quiver on his back, put it on the bow, and let it out with a whoosh without aiming. The white rabbit was running in panic, as fast as a meteor, but in the end, it could not escape the doom, and was shot in the hind leg by this arrow, and immediately fell to the ground. The onlookers and guards all applauded. Applause rang out, and I don't know who took the lead in shouting, "The Crown Prince is mighty." Then everyone around screamed, and for a moment the sound was terrifying. Minger's arrow is not bad. Even Xia Linxuan, who has always been strict, couldn't help but stroke his chin and smile, and then explained to Pu Qiutai beside him, "That white rabbit runs very fast, I thought this kid couldn't shoot. I didn't expect him to be able to predict the direction of the white rabbit's running. One arrow hit, yes, really good." Xia Dongming didn't hear his father's praise, But this was the first time he followed Xia Linxuan to spring hunting, and he was able to get some results by firing an arrow, which was already very good, so he was naturally very excited. Xiao Dingzi, the little eunuch who followed beside him, had already rushed forward, and ran back with the fat rabbit in his hand, and said with a smile on his face, "Your Royal Highness Crown Prince. This white rabbit is very fat, look at it, there is not a single miscellaneous hair on the body, oops, it is really beautiful." Not bad, not bad. Xia Dongming grabbed the rabbit, only to see that the rabbit still had his own arrows stuck in his hind legs, and he was bleeding at this time. He nodded and said, "Xiao Dingzi, this rabbit will be handed over to you first. This is the first prey that this prince has hunted, and I will give it to my father and mother later, and keep it for roasting and eating at night." The white rabbit seemed to understand his words, and struggled with more and more panic. Here Xia Dongming looked at Zhu Shanyan and was about to show off, but he saw that the other party's eyes were firmly fixed on the rabbit. Probably because he didn't expect anyone to pay attention to him, so his eyes showed a little sadness. "What's wrong? I shot this rabbit and you're not happy?" Full of excitement like being poured down by a basin of cold water, Xia Dongming's face immediately changed. He thought that he was victorious, and he could get Zhu Shanyan's praise and envy. But he didn't expect that the other party didn't care about himself at all, but was attracted by a rabbit. As soon as he thought of this, His Royal Highness Crown Prince couldn't wait to roast the white rabbit right now. "Ah, no, no." Zhu Shanyan was startled, and hurriedly withdrew his gaze and reached out to wipe the water from the corners of his eyes. He just saw the white rabbit looking around in a panic, but no one could save it. And he couldn't help but think of his family and himself, how similar they were to the prince of the old country, under the majesty of the new monarch of the new dynasty, and this white rabbit. "Not really, right? You're still crying? What the hell is going on?" How could Xia Dongming let go of Zhu Shanyan so easily? It was rare that Pu Qiutai was not around, and he would not protect this beautiful guy behind him, so that he could talk to each other happily. Therefore, he urged him to take a few steps forward, looked at Zhu Shanyan seriously, and his eyebrows revealed a faint majesty belonging to the Prince of the East Palace, and asked, I didn't have." Zhu Shanyan panicked all of a sudden, and subconsciously wanted to go to Pu Qiutai for shelter. But Xia Dongming said impatiently, "Can you not count on your mother for everything? Can he protect you for the rest of your life? I don't beat you, I just ask you, is there anything else you can't say?" "Not." Zhu Shanyan was startled, for fear that his true thoughts would be penetrated by Xia Dongming. So he hurriedly shouted, and then said, I just felt sorry for that rabbit, so I heard you say that you are going to bake it and eat it at night, a little. I can't bear to. It's just a rabbit, and it's worth it." Xia Dongming scratched his head, a little unable to understand Zhu Shanyan's thoughts. But looking at the other party's weak and cowardly appearance, he thought that Pu Qiutai was also such a compassionate character, so he felt that he understood. This Zhu Shanyan probably followed his mother and liked these little animals. Thinking of this, the little prince's always cold and hard heart softened a little, and he waved his hand and said, "Forget it, what should I do? Since you like this rabbit, then don't eat it, and give it to you to raise." After he finished speaking, he turned his head to Xiao Dingzi and said, "Go to the imperial physician to bandage the rabbit's leg wound, you carry it first, and after returning to the palace, you will raise it in the Yunhai Palace." After speaking, he turned his head, stared at Zhu Shanyan word by word, and said, "This rabbit has been given to you, take care of it." "Ah yes? Oh, good." Xiao Dingzi used 4 words in a row before he finally reacted to what the master was talking about just now. He looked down at the white rabbit who was still panicked in his eyes. but had quieted down due to blood loss and despair, and suddenly shook his head and smiled, and whispered to himself, "Your guy's luck is really good." What did the prince and Zhu Shanyan say? Xia Linxuan looked at the oncoming Xiao Dingzi and asked casually. He and Pu Qiutai believed in the rains, and they were only in front of them at this time, but the scene where Xia Dongming and Zhu Shanyan were talking before fell in the eyes of the two, so Xia Linxuan was a little strange. Pu Qiutai was also a little nervous, for fear that the little prince would have some idea to trick Zhu Shanyan again, so he stared at Xiao Dingzi, but saw that the strange expression on the little eunuch's face had not faded, and when he heard the words, he raised the rabbit in his hand and told the story again. "This stinky boy," Xia Linxuan scolded with a smile, and then turned his head to look at Pu Qiutai. "Okay, are you relieved now? The prince looks at your face and takes good care of the remnants of the former dynasty. You don't have to worry about waiting for him to grow up and ascend the throne, after the two of us travel around. He will slaughter the remnants of the former dynasty." Pu Qiutai glared at him and snorted coldly. "Yes. The prince is much more benevolent than the emperor. I almost fell off my horse." Xia Linxuan stretched out his arms, pretended to almost fall off the horse, and pouted. "That kid is kind. Have you forgotten what he did with those two remnants of the former dynasty that day? Is there a man like you? Exposing the son's short, like words?" Pu Qiutai was speechless. Xia Linxuan even had to steal his son's limelight. Whenever he praised the prince, he always had to turn out the prince's black history to laugh. This kind of the lord who even had to eat his son's vinegar really made him angry and funny.